The PhD process of becoming comfortable with a theoretical framework that bonds with my ethos, emerging themes, current limited levels of theoretical insight, and a philosophical perspective has been an evolving process. Throughout the search, frameworks initially seemed well suited. However, despite tailoring, each eventually simply felt too baggy, and I ultimately abandoned them, leaving me feeling unanchored. Then posthumanism appeared from the gloom, a term I'd used liberally and thought I knew the meaning of. And therefore I'd seen a glimmer of hope for a viewpoint, vision and perspective that resonated with my post-anthropocentric optimism for symbiotically-ethical more-than-human relationships. However, I found in contrast to my hopes and beliefs, by prefixing humanism with post, a variety of theorists have invoked ultra-anthropocentric views which foreshadow further compressing other life forms to the periphery of symbiotic ethical considerations. This short reflexive piece explores my iterative re-evaluation of my intention to employ posthumanism as a framework and questions whether my opposition to anthropocentric exclusionism, meshed with my optimism for a more post-anthropocentric inclusive world, serves as a meaningful form of advocacy, or is resistance ultimately futile? Have a plan, get a flan is a phrase my partner Steve and I often use. Nothing rarely goes to plan, and we have had to learn to be both flexible and also to be able to see why one door was firmly closed in our planning phases while we were being pushed onto another path. We have had to search for the glimmer constantly, although it often feels like a repeatedly uphill hike until we have had the opportunity to reflect. Studying and researching along the academic journey is no different, not only for my own personal goals, but for the change I hope and advocate for towards a non-anthropocentric future. While I'm aware of the utopian dreams of this and the likely unachievable abolitionist notes I resonate with, I, like many, keep hiking. My advocacy research interests are focused on cats and sharks, currently in specific contexts: street living feline lives in Saudi Arabia and shark-human relationships in a specific context in the Bahamas. In both contexts, I have used the term post-human, and I had thought the term had a simple meaning and that it carried a simple definition, but I was wrong. As often usual in academia, it has messy definitions and messy boundaries. I'm trying to take my understanding of posthumanism, its meanings, definitions and applications from a tight academic knot to an academic bow within my thesis. Given that the determination and the desire, need, to cover all the bases before I commit to presenting a piece of writing is baked into my personality, this also gets messy, and I'm often looking for the flan. So what did I think posthumanism was? Essentially thinking beyond just the human species, decentering us as the so-called exceptional superior lives, which, as a species, predominantly place our needs and desires above all other species. Anthropocentrism leaves us circling around the human-centred plug hole. It is anthro-introspective, which as standard others non-humans. Even this term non-human is human-centric, and I'm determined to settle on a more suitable term to use. Posthumanism, I believed, was a deconstruction and a questioning of the centering of humans on the planet we share with others. However, while some authors, whom I shall return to, do advocate for this approach, some seek the deconstruction and the evolution of the human through technology to a post-human species. Furthermore, prefixing humanism with post has led some minds to invoke ultrahumanism, an anthropocentric view so anthro-elitist that it further pulverizes other life to the edges of consideration. While this surprised me, it probably shouldn't. I live in an ever-optimistic bubble that one day the prevailing human gaze on the world's other species will lose its arrogance and narcissism, and finding the term posthumanism gave me a dopamine shot of hope. Finally, there's a movement, a glimmer, a change, a revolution. This is how I felt about anthrozoology until I discovered the field includes a great deal of anthropocentrism. However, not to be permanently deflated or defeated, I knew I had seen the term posthumanism in the way I wanted it to be defined and applied. For example, in Hamilton and Taylor's book, Ethnography Beyond Humanism, although I had wondered why they didn't use the term posthumanism in their book title, I'm starting to see why. So what is posthumanism? Well, there's too much to cover everything here, but suffice to say, one strand basically envisages human enhancement, where the ultra-humanist approach promotes the radical alteration of human minds and bodies in order to develop a new post-human species with the potential to transcend current human capabilities. The mental jiu-jitsu of the post-human interpretations, strands and critiques, not to mention Barrard and Barotti's neologisms, is not easy, and whether to utilise any or refer to them, I'm not yet sure. Sam rightly tells me there are more appropriate authors to refer to, but my ADHD traits ask me, what if you're asked about them in the Viva? And so down the rabbit hole I go. I often refer to my currently broken body as my spacesuit. So when Ferrando declares how the human body in some post-human views is seen as a biological outfit which is perceived as the battlefield for progression, this chimes with my thoughts. I would have disregarded this view as fantasy until a few months ago, but upon seeing Brian Johnson, the man who wants to live forever, spending in excess of $2 million to attain the golden key to access the forbidden fruit of immortality, it seems the sci-fi domain has arrived. One form of posthumanism, liberal transhumanism, ideologizes the free market, allowing anyone who wants to attain such a goal, although they have to be able to afford and access the opportunities to be able to do so. Seeing Elon Musk progressively acquiring monetary and oligarchic power while he increasingly flexes his trans-ultra-humanist desires unchecked alerts me to libertarian transhumanist movies such as the movie Elysium, where only the elite gain the benefits of technology, or the movie In Time, where one must pay for the privilege of being allowed any extra lifespan after becoming 25 years old. The movies Robocop and Captain America, where technologically enhanced humans are instrumentally used by governments in policing and war, are now not so far-fetched. AI pioneers such as Marvin Minsky and Hans Moravec have presented the biological body as something to be overcome, says Ferrando. Moreover, post-biological is described as where transhumanist thinkers generally present mind uploading, the hypothetical process of transferring a conscious mind from a brain to a non-biological substrate. This reminds me of the seemingly once ridiculous idea portrayed in the movie The Man with Two Brains, a love story where Steve Martin's character is in love with the brain of his lover, which is kept in a jar. Furthermore, my mind leaps and wonders whether secretly, or to be posted on Truth Social or X, Trump and or Elon will declare how they have frozen their own genetically enhanced sperm in order to be sent to Mars on SpaceX to populate future Mars post-human colonies. This does not seem beyond belief at the moment. Of course, there are movies that show resistance to such posthumanism: Terminator, Robocop, The Minority Report, or The Matrix, which expose how humans are controlled by other forces, and perhaps the meniscus of this is showing already. But in this post-human view, there's no room for other species unless we are using their bodies. I advocate for the post-human red pill, which in the movie The Matrix wakes those that take it to the unmasked world of human usage. Morpheus warns, this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And the red pill in the movie shows those that choose it how humans have become slaves, a subjectivity fully under the domination of another, which some of the movie characters and many movie watchers find abominable. Which human ever chooses to be a slave? Albeit there's probably a market for it on OnlyFans. But the red pill is not seemingly as tasty as the blue pill when it comes to regarding more than human animals. However, as Ferrando points out, and the aforementioned post-human movies portray, Domination brings its complementary counterpart, rebellion. The red pill was my choice for advocating for animals, my form of rebellion. Witnessing and reading about their lived reality is challenging, but not as much as living with the anthropocentrism is for them. However, I was surprised at how much resistance and resilience is required in the red pill post-human awakening and advocacy. The comfort of the blue pillar humanists and post-humanists is fiercely guarded, and any attempts to advocate for more than human animals is often met with hostility, disdain, and even hatred. My own resistance is only part of the story here. I wanted a representational image to symbolically portray how I felt about Christina's relationship with sharks. She is unusual and advocates for sharks in an unconventional manner. While she considers herself a conservationist, I suggest she is more. Although this presentation is not focused upon the principles of conservation, I believe its inherently institutionalised utilitarian approach to homogenising life, to conserving rather than protecting species rather than individuals or communities, is one that wreaks violence upon more than human animals globally. Turning to sharks specifically, distancing representations are often wielded which keep us at arm's length from seeing sharks as individuals or neighbours who possess a vested interest in how they live. It appears those in the scientific or rational world who resist are rebuked if they wish to utilise a more subjective approach and question not what they can do for us, but how they want to be considered in this world. Even while the debate over compassionate conservation rages and pushes the boundaries of scientific anthropocentrism, conservation is all about us, not about them, and they currently comprise everyone else who is not human. Christina straddles many worlds, for example, ecotourism and business. She also faces many challenges, but she still advocates for sharks with more posthumanism than any scientific approach I've come across. Scientific thought is a reflection of our culture, understandings and abilities, and is rife with biases. Yet when we claim or are told that something is scientifically proven, the conversation is often effectively trying to be shut down rather than allowing questions. Similarly, I find the prevailing meaning wielded by the word humanism is erroneous at worst, optimistic at best. We emotionally throw around phrases such as, "Where is the humanity?" which implies that humans are innately kind and compassionate. While this could be hotly debated, humanity or humanism does not anchor its, at least Western, tendrils in the ethically significant compassion for all. There is much debate over what humanism means, but suffice to say it is rooted in human-centred values, needs and wants, and indeed many variations suggest, then question, or oppose the definitions of humanism where our supposed innate kindness and compassion does not prevent us from killing over 80 billion land animals and an estimated 4.3 to 10.8 billion fish a day. So what can I do? Resist? Nurtured by authors such as Haraway, Barad, Brasiotti, Hamilton and Taylor, and I'm open to suggestions for more relevant texts. These authors trouble the boundaries, dismantle dualisms, and problematise humanism and anthropocentrism and their associated foundational key concepts and values. Post-human critical theory unfolds at the intersection between post-humanism on the one hand and post-anthropocentrism on the other, says Brasiotti. And the Brock University Post-Human Research Institute tell us that it is their mission to interrogate the human and more than human from a post-anthropocentric perspective. So my mind stretches to the non-prevailing end of the spectrum of post-human, post-anthropocentrism, and I'm aware that my mind is limited by my thinking abilities and the human and Western cultured saturated data it has been fed for decades. However, while Aina et al. Claim the envisaged era after anthropocentrism can never be fully achieved, I am going to ride the ripples of suggestions that we can step forward. Even if we can't see the whole light yet, we can see the glimmer. Despite the barriers, we can prod and poke at the mortar and pick away at the spalling. Not every wall needs a sledgehammer. While I contemplate the human-centred downward spiralling plug hole we are staring into, Herb Erector's observation resonates. Posthumanism is the cultural malaise or euphoria that is caused by the feeling that arises once you start taking the idea of post-anthropocentrism seriously. I wonder, does my opposition to such exclusion and optimism for a more post-anthropocentric and inclusive world serve as a meaningful form of advocacy, or is resistance ultimately futile? Ferrando claims the post-human destabilises the limits and symbolic borders posed by the notion of the human. But can it not also destabilise and question the limits of everything that is non-human? Am I able to deconstruct shark-human relations, destabilise the limits of prevailing thoughts about the possibilities of these relations? Is it good to be a disruptor? Will it help or hinder my advocacy? Compare Trump and Assange's successes, for example. Am I capable of smart, destabilising, disruptive thoughts? Do I need deeper academic jiu-jitsu skills? I am never sure where the rabbit hole stops, or whether there are more thought treasures lying in one more book, one more article, one more page, one more line. Like rabbits, my thoughts are prolific, but not all thrive. Also, how do I descend to the human when I am human, with human thoughts and human mind? I don't even fully know the mind of my husband. For example, he has a different lived experience to me as a male in the world. And I can see that reflected in the choices and considerations he doesn't have to make, but I do. While I think I know what my cats want, often more than my husband, how can I access the lived experiences and minds of sharks, especially when I know there will be accusations of anthropomorphism, which is always threatened? Back to my desired representation of shark listening. As I am a dreadful artist, with a variety of iterative prompts, AI and I co-created this Sarah-centered perspective of Christina's shark listening. While it is not perfect, and AI and I were unable to refine our communication to be on exactly the right wavelength, you may understand my symbolic intentions. Perhaps you see the post-anthropocentric glimmer. Resistance is futile, so what can I do? I need to ask the right questions, which hopefully I have been doing, but I feel they could dig deeper. As my personality has baked-in determination, or stubbornness if you ask my biological family, I'll keep moving. Even if it is slow, even if there's no obvious path, my steps will create a path for my journey. Why am I doing this? As Melanie Challenger put it, the world is now dominated by an animal that doesn't think it's an animal, and the future is being imagined by an animal that doesn't want to be an animal. We are not listening. You may recognise this from Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which reminds me of our human selves. You know, said Arthur, it's at times like these when I'm trapped in a Vogan airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young. What did she tell you? I don't know, I didn't listen. The post-human Borg may have said resistance is futile. But I wonder for whom resistance is futile, those who advocate for a post-anthropocentric future or those who resist one. I'll keep trying the best I can to keep the glimmer alive.